What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Good Wolf Project. I'm your host, Jerry Scarlato, and today's conversation is with Dr. David Bilstrom. David is an advanced fellow in anti-aging, regenerative medicine, and integrative medicine. And today he's here to talk to us about testosterone levels. David was on the podcast previously talking to us about the gut-brain axis and how our gut health impacts our brain health and vice versa as well. Today, we're going to be talking about testosterone because testosterone is such a trending topic nowadays, and my belief is that there's many things that we can do to naturally raise and boost our testosterone levels so that we can start feeling better, moving better, having more energy, being more productive in our life without having to take a shot, which we can do, by the way, because there's so much that this episode is so good, you guys. I cannot overestimate how important this episode is, how impactful this episode is, because of literally the strategies he just tells you to do, things that you can do today to start changing. In his own practice alone, and him helping people improve their testosterone levels, he's like 9.5 times out of 10, we can get people back to an optimal testosterone level naturally without having to go injectable. So there's things you can do if you're willing to do them. If you want your body to work optimally, get it to work optimally. Don't force it, because forcing rarely works out for the best. Now, of course, we get to that. Before we get to that, is what that was supposed to be. Make sure that you hit pause real quick. You guys can go give us a quick review up to 5 stars. Definitely appreciate you guys doing that, because the more reviews we have, the more people we reach. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm sure you're glad you get to see my good looking face today, but you can also give us a subscribe on YouTube. You can hit that subscribe button and follow us on YouTube so that, again, we get to reach more people, so that more people can get this message that you're going to hear today, so that they don't have to go waste their money on injectables. Nonetheless, get your notebooks out. Enjoy this conversation with Dr. David Bilstrom. David, great to have you on again. This is going to be such an important conversation. I was glad whenever we finished our conversation last time, we talked about gut health and the connection between the gut and brain. We talked about that a little bit. And then at the end of it, you mentioned talking about testosterone because it was such an important topic and because it's such a trending topic right now. Now, of course, it's trending because so many men primarily, but not only, but men primarily are getting on testosterone. Ironically, this is a conversation that should have been happening for a long time, but not necessarily, it shouldn't have started the way or the reason I think that it started. The reason it's starting is because the medical industry can now make money off of it. Not that they couldn't have chosen to do this a long time ago. I don't know why all of a sudden, they're deciding to push testosterone the way that they are. But testosterone health is an important thing. And there's plenty of things that impact our testosterone levels, number one, and our testosterone usage. Maybe that's a basic way to say it, but how our body actually uses testosterone. I think as far as I know, layman here, there are two different things we need to look at: our testosterone levels, which we're going to start with that, and then the things that our body needs to do in order to use our testosterone, sex hormone binding globulin levels, and things along those lines, so that we're actually using what we have. So let's start with the role that testosterone plays in the body and what we mean by testosterone. Like, what's the metric we're talking about?
Sure. So I think if I could, let me just say something about hormones in general. So testosterone is a hormone, testosterone hormone. So hormones are made by the body in order to do work, keep away inflammation, and keep the body healthy and happy. Because the hormones will keep away excess inflammation, we don't develop excess inflammation in any particular body part that's going to damage the body part. And so we now know that all chronic disease is excess inflammation. Wherever you have too much inflammation, there is a body part that's not happy. Too much inflammation in the brain, brain stuff. Too much inflammation within the blood vessels, you get blockage of those blood vessels, heart attacks and strokes, all this kind of stuff. So it's very important that we make hormones. Thyroid hormone is one that people hear a lot about, testosterone, estrogen, and all these. So everybody makes a ton of different kind of hormones. so they can do work, keep the body healthy and happy. And you should make these hormones your entire life. If you stop making adequate hormones, well, here comes this inflammation, here comes this chronic disease. And so testosterone is a hormone made in both sexes. Men should make more testosterone than women, just like women make more estrogen than men. But both sexes need
about how
both.
much more? About how much more?
Well, ideally, when you do a blood test, you'd like to
Just a
see in a
range.
woman 40 to 60. In a
Okay.
guy, you'd like to see 800 to 1100. And so, quite a bit more, right? And um, in men, testosterone is made in the testicles. And we should be able to make this our whole life. So historically, like 2 generations ago, if you're shooting for like a total testosterone level of 800 to 1100 in a blood test, well, you might get a guy in his 70s and he's kind of dropped down to like 600, 650. And he's like, that's really good. That's really good. Um, Now, when a body makes a hormone, your body parts, every cell in your body needs testosterone. So you don't just wait around and go, oh, hey, testicles, we need some testosterone now. Could you make some? The body's like, well, we need it 24/7. We might need a little bit more now than another time of the day, different times of the day. We're trying to work out. Well, we're going to want to have, testosterone really available so that we can make muscle, burn fat optimally during workouts. We're going to want to have plenty of testosterone when our brain really needs to be functioning well because boy, that brain needs testosterone. So your testicles, your body makes testosterone and it stores it. And then your body parts can say, okay, hey, we need some testosterone now. And then you just let it go. So on a blood test, there's a total testosterone level that you can run, and any lab can run it. It's not like a special test. Any lab can run it. So you got the total, and then you also have a free testosterone, the amount that's free to do the work. Now, you want to make plenty and store it, but you also need to be able to free it up. And kind of like you mentioned, there is a protein called sex hormone binding globulin, globular proteins, that will be one of the proteins will bind up testosterone and hold it until you need it. And then you let it go, ideally. Though in our world, it's so crazy hard to be healthy, it can be hard to make testosterone, or even if you make it, it'd be hard to free it up for a variety of reasons that we'll talk about today. But this testosterone is so important for every cell in the body of a man and a woman, but particularly guys. Women, there's this huge hormone symphony, tons of different hormones, all really well balanced. Now, that is true in men too, but the primary hormone in men is really testosterone. And if a guy's not feeling well, the very first thing that you should think about is what is going on with my testosterone. Because if I have enough testosterone, ooh, I'm feeling good. Brain, body, you name it. If I'm not feeling good, you're going, okay, so something's going on here, of course. Let me think about testosterone, and it's easy test to run to find out.
So total testosterone, free testosterone, and then these other things that regulate also how well we use that free testosterone. From a total testosterone versus free testosterone level, I'm assuming I know the answer to this, but if we have both numbers, we have a high total testosterone number and a low free testosterone number. I'm assuming that's not what we want. If we have a medium, say, total testosterone number and a medium, maybe right around the same, it's not going to be the same, but a medium free testosterone number, that's going to be better, but we still want to get both of them higher.
Yeah, that's
So,
absolutely correct. And so this is where um, the body's really good at compensating. Ideally, we should have this total testosterone level of 800 to 1100. Ideally, we want a free testosterone of 200 to 300. Now, if for some reason our body is finding it hard to make testosterone, the total may go down, but you'd like to have the body go, okay, we can cover these bases. We're going to do what we need to do to free up more testosterone. So the free stays really good, even though the total may be shifting down. And you go, oh my gosh, the body is so smart. Look at it compensating like that. But eventually, the things that might make it challenging to make total testosterone are also going to make it hard to free it up. Or you may have a great total, but you got so much of this, let's say you have way too much of this sex hormone binding globulin, you're binding way too much of it up. Your total may be great, your free is terrible. And you go, well, I feel like I got all these symptoms of low testosterone, but somebody did a total testosterone level and they said, you're fine, which we're going to talk about what's fine on a blood test. But I still feel, well, you may not have enough of the free testosterone, including when you do a blood test for anything. Testosterone is a good example of this. And you get the results of a blood test from the lab. There's three columns of information. The first column is the name of the test. The second column is your result. And then the third column is what they call a reference range. Sometimes they call it a normal range. And unfortunately, most medical practitioners and patients are under the impression that that range, that reference range, is based on where the healthy people are. So you can have testosterone, your result, and you're in the range, and you're told, oh, you're great, you're fantastic, you're in the range. And you go, well, that's kind of weird because I don't feel so well. Why do my blood tests in general say I'm in the range, I'm healthy, when obviously I'm not feeling healthy? Well, what you need to know is that range is not based on where the healthy people are. It's actually based on statistics. And so the way that labs do this, and this is why different ranges are in different labs, it's not like they're all working on, well, this is what the science says, and we're all together in this. It's like, well, no, it really depends on the population you're testing. So if you test 100 people for anything, let's say we test the height of 100 people. Well, you're going to get some people, few people, very short, some people, few people very tall, but more people in the middle. So no matter what you test in statistics, it looks like a bell-shaped curve with the mean right down the middle. So 50% of people are above the mean, 50% of people tested below the mean, height, weight, testosterone level, whatever it is. And so in our population, guys have terrible testosterone compared to where they used to be. So when they test people, they're automatically probably testing people that don't feel so good. So you're being compared to people that don't feel well, when you may say, well, I want to be tested, and tell me where the astronauts are. Tell me where those guys that climb Mount Everest are, because they sure seem to be healthy. I would like to be where they are. Well, the science tells us that. I mean, NASA does this research, and we know this research. But when you look at statistics, they arbitrarily say, okay, so here's this bell-shaped curve distribution of 100 guys we tested testosterone on. And we're going to say that everybody that falls within 2 standard deviations of the mean, that's going to be our reference range. In statistics, 95% of all results falls within 2 standard deviation mean. So you have to be the 2.5 worst of 100 to fall out low, or 2.5 best to fall out high, and everybody else falls in. And so we want people 800 to 1100. On most labs, they're going to give the reference range of 200 to 800. So you can be 201 and be told you're great, you're fine. It's not testosterone being low that's making you feel sick. And you go, well, geez, something is. I guess it's not that. But it's like 201, they're being told. If you're 199, oh, geez, you're out of the range, low. But 201, oh, you're fine. When you really want to be 800 to 1100. And so that's unfortunate, because the right test may have been run, but the interpretation was incorrect. And then you're led to believe that you're fine, it's not your testosterone, when you're totally tanked out.
It sounds an awful lot like diabetes. You're not officially a diabetic unless you're what, a 6.8 A1C. What's the number?
Or a fasting blood sugar of 130 or more.
Oh, is that what it is? But if you're
Yeah,
129 or 125 even, or 120 even, then yeah, they might tell you, well, maybe you should walk a little more. Oh, maybe you should do this a little more. But for now, don't worry about it. You're in the safe range. I hope at least they figured it out a little bit, and at least understand that, at least pay attention to the people that are pre-diabetic and have had that going on for a long time. But I feel like it's a lot like that.
it is exactly like that. And so Harvard did a study about 15 years ago where they said, so when we talk to people about blood sugar, and this ties into testosterone too, is everybody's fasting blood sugar should be 84 or below. Because for every 1 point above 84, Harvard said, you have a 6% chance of getting diabetes next 10 years. So if you go 94, you're still well within the range. Usually the range goes up to at least 100. You got a 60% chance of diabetes next 10 years. You get to 99, you're looking at a 90%, you're basically guaranteed diabetes next 10 years, and you're still in the range.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is where you got to know where you should be, not where everybody else is, and what that range is, including one of the big reasons why guys are getting so much diabetes is testosterone is super important in blood sugar control. So there's this tie into low testosterone production, and then this epidemic of diabetes that guys are having as well, and kind of the metabolic syndrome in general, which is blood sugar control issues, abnormal weight gain, and then all those cholesterol issues. That is just an epidemic. Well, so much of that epidemic in guys is driven by the lack of testosterone production.
Hmm. The body is an amazing thing. There's no doubt about that. So we want to know the difference between what the healthcare system would define as a healthy range and an optimal range. The optimal range for total testosterone is between 800 and 1100. What healthcare system may define as a healthy range or a normal range is between 200 and 800, but that's not
Correct.
what we want. We want
Correct.
optimal. We don't want normal. We don't want average. And those two things are different. And the way that you put it was very succinct. And the way you described it, how they test and what they're giving you, the range they're giving you is based on the average. And if you can understand that the average person in America is sick, diseased, and doesn't feel good, low energy, why would you want a normal blood range of a person that's sick, diseased, and with low energy?
Absolutely.
So, what are a few of the things that we can look for before we actually start to get into, before we start talking about things like sex hormone binding globulin and other things that may impact our testosterone, how we use our testosterone, maybe? What are some symptoms we could look for that maybe because we could have a testosterone level that's too high? I think that's much less likely in today's society.
Yeah.
Um, but we can most of us are dealing with testosterone levels that are too low. So outside of things like low energy, what are some other obvious ones or some other things that we could look out for?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the brain and testosterone are so intimately connected. And so one thing you tend to see in guys is with guys aren't making enough testosterone, they get real grumpy and short. And so what you get is just, geez, you're a grumpy old man and you're 35 years old
Mm.
or you're 25 years old.
Mm.
You know, you're just a pain to be around, and you're complaining about everything and nothing's making you happy. You're just a grumpy old dude, and you're not an old dude. It is a classic one. You see that a whole lot.
Mm.
And so, like on my intake forms, we have a lot of 1 to 10s. So your energy 1 to 10, anxiety 1 to 10, sleep quality 1 to 10, memory, concentration, and irritability 1 to 10. And so the guys fill out their forms. They come in. Let's say the guy comes in with his wife, and we go through all the history and we go through the energy and all this kind of stuff. And here's irritability. The guy ranked it a 2. So I said, okay, so here's your irritability at 2. The wife looks at him like, 2? What are you talking about? And he looks at her like, well, what? Am I irritable? She goes, oh my God, you're a 9 if you're anything. Oh,
Mm.
and he's like, really? Goes, oh my gosh, you're so grumpy and short and hard to be around. And you kind of, and the other guy goes, oh, geez, maybe that's right.
Yeah.
You don't really recognize yourself sometimes. And so that grumpy old man, but also here's it's so important for brain. Here's your brain fog though too. Here's memory and concentration 1 to 10. 10 is my brain is clicking like a computer. Without testosterone, you are definitely brain foggy. You're just not clicking like you used to, kind of a thing. All these brain kind of things. And you're depressed and all this kind of stuff. So it's a lot of brain stuff that hits guys oftentimes with this. Another thing, what you see is it's so important to have testosterone to make muscle and burn fat, to keep that lean body mass. And so this problem of not making enough testosterone is happening at all ages. So what I see a lot of, so I've sat in a lot of high school gymnasiums and benches watching my son and my daughter play sports. And, here you got the guys' high school basketball team. Okay. They're playing basketball like 3 hours a day. They got weightlifting as a class. They're doing here you are 18. You should be able to sit on the couch all day long, eat like 10 meals a day, and you got six-pack abs.
Hmm.
That's kind of my generation, the generation before. You see all the old athletes like, oh my gosh, they are just lean machines, right? Well, here you got like an 18-year-old high school basketball player, men's basketball player. They're running on the court. They got the jersey on. They got a spare tire around their
Soft.
belly.
Hmm.
Oh my God. How can you have a spare tire around your belly at 18 years of age playing basketball 3 hours a day? Their testosterone levels 180. Oh my gosh, it is just totally tanked. We've had like 110, 115. In the old days, the dudes in their 70s were like 600. Well, we got guys in their 20 years old, 18 years old, under 200. It is an epidemic. Of and their brains aren't working well. They're not performing well. All this kind of stuff. They've got great skills. They're on the basketball team, but man, their skills. You're just seeing part of their skills, brain, sports, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I 100% see exactly what you're saying. Another thing that I've noticed a lot with young kids is male pattern baldness has increased significantly with kids under the age of like 25. I've seen that a lot. I just randomly started noticing that. I'm like, man, I feel like there's a lot of older teenagers, 18, 19, 20-year-olds that have thin hair, which is
Hmm.
very that's a DHT issue, dehydrotestosterone. Is that
Right.
correct?
Right. Yep.
That's a DHT issue, which is relevant, I believe, to testosterone as well.
That's part of the loss of the testosterone is you're excessively converting to the dihydrotestosterone
Mm,
rather than keeping it where it should be, which is now you need dihydrotestosterone.
mm,
We call that the dude hormone.
mm.
You need it, but if you're excessively converting to it, well, then you don't have testosterone, but then you got the excessive dihydro with those kind of problems and other problems as well.
Okay, so we want an optimal testosterone level, not an average testosterone level. We have a lot of factors that we have to work with. Let's start with some environmental things. I think uh, where we could go next, there's just so many different places we could go next. And you can stop me and tell me, hey, Jared, we need to go here before we go there, which may be the case. And that's okay. If you stop me and you're saying, well, we need to take another turn before we go into this next avenue, where do we start to turn things around? Where do we start to, because knowing what I know, and I know more than the average person, there's a litany of things that impact testosterone levels that most people don't pay attention to. One of the big ones that come off the top of my head is plastics. People don't pay a damn bit of attention to the plastics that they drink out of, putting leftovers in plastics, and how that the chemicals that are seeping into that food that you're eating, how that's going to impact your hormone levels, and so on and so forth. But I may be getting ahead of myself. So where do we start to turn this around so that we can start feeling better? Because I don't believe that it has to jump right to you need to be injected with testosterone. If this is not an old person problem, quote unquote, and clearly it's not because of what you're saying, that means all of us, including people over the age of 60, can do things that can get us potentially to optimal, but at least much closer to optimal before we can make the decision on whether or not we need to have injectables in the first place.
Yeah, and that's really a spot on is to know that this is a problem, but also to know that problems can be corrected. They can be reversed. It's not like, oh, am I gonna, I don't have any options kind of a thing. Now, originally, what came out was the importance of testosterone and how the safety of it. One of the things that really held it back was decades ago. One of the first things that was written about testosterone is a doc had two male patients, obviously low in testosterone. He gave them testosterone. Well, then old guys, right? And they were really feeling sick. and one of them ended up with prostate cancer. Well, then all of a sudden, oh, testosterone causes prostate cancer. We can't use it. And oh my gosh, that was like a 4 decade, maybe 5 decade. You got to be kidding me. Just because somebody, it's like, well, hey, I drink water and I got cancer. Well, it must be the water that gave cancer. It's like, no, no, no.
That is the
So,
irony behind all of this, right? Because
oh,
testosterone
it's
was built,
crazy.
the steroids, all the steroid heads out there. Anyway, that's another
Yeah.
conversation, but that's the
And
irony
so that
behind
was a
all
big
this.
one. And it turns out that testosterone really protects guys from prostate cancer. And what came out was like, well, and this was from also a guy at Harvard who was the world expert urologist on wrote all the textbooks on urology and testosterone. He said, well, it never made sense because testosterone doesn't cause prostate cancer. Lack of testosterone causes prostate cancer. This is why guys get prostate cancer. They're in their 60s and 70s and 80s. They're not the 20-year-olds. If it was testosterone that gave you prostate cancer, but the 20-year-olds that get it, not the old dudes with no testosterone. So it turns out testosterone is very protective of the prostate, as it turns out. And so that kind of freed people up to go, oh, well, thank goodness, even though there was decades of science, somebody actually came out and go, that's ridiculous. And it was the world expert on all this kind of stuff. Now, ideally, part of testosterone is keeping it as testosterone. You don't want excessive conversion to dihydrotestosterone, and that is at higher levels than you want. That can irritate the prostate. Excess estrogen in guys, because testosterone can turn into estrogen, and you might have testosterone production, but it's turning into estrogens too much. That can irritate the prostate as well. So you like the testosterone to stay where you put it. So because we knew how important testosterone was with all these decades of information, people said, well, we got to give testosterone to guys when they're low. And guys go, wow, I feel so much better. This is like the old me kind of a thing. Now, but we now know that most guys, you can get them to make their testosterone on their own. And that's really the best way to do it, if at all possible. One of the challenges if you give somebody testosterone restoration therapy is, well, if you give it to them and they're already excessively converting to estrogens and dihydrotestosterone, they're just going to do the same thing. And they're not going to get the bang for your effort. And then they got even more of these things they don't want. And that's one unfortunate thing is guys are given testosterone restoration therapy. You never want to do it orally. It has to be ideally an injectable once a week. I won't go into more than that. But unfortunately, a lot of times when people are working with maybe docs that don't know quite as much as would be optimal, they're not checking for dihydrotestosterone levels or estrogen levels to see if there's excessive conversion. They're just looking at testosterone levels. And that's not really doing the patient. You're not taking care of the patient
Justice.
the right way,
Mhm.
kind of a thing. But it's great. We now know so much of what causes testosterone to drop. And by addressing those, we can get most guys to actually make their own testosterone again. And so one of the big ones is stress. There's a hormone called cortisol, the stress hormone, and we live in an incredibly stressful world nowadays. Whether it's emotional stress, whether it's physical stress, like toxicity, like you said, it's all these environmental toxins like plastic, but also flame retardants, pesticides, herbicides, flame retardants, lead, mercury, oh, our environment. That's all physical stress of the system, and it tends to kick up the stress hormone cortisol, even if maybe emotionally we're not super stressed. Just the physical stress will do it, but we live in an emotionally stressful world as well. Um, that makes it hard to make testosterone. Now, stress also hurts the gut. And you referenced originally that we kind of started talking about the gut and how important the gut is, central mechanism, gut brain axis, this kind of stuff. Well, there's so many things that'll throw off the gut. Stress throws off the gut. Antibiotics throws off the gut. And people are given antibiotics like candy, Motrins and Advils, throw off the gut. Hey, you got, this joint bugging you, that joint, will pop some Advil and all this kind of stuff. Well, that kills the joint. That kills the gut. A lot of medicines are terrible for the gut, including acid blocking medicines. Kill the gut, and we use those like candy as well. Even some of the medicines one of the big medicines they use for blood sugar control kills the gut. As you're trying to keep the blood sugar reasonable, kills the gut. And so the gut gets totally disrupted, and several things will happen. one is we may eat food that's of high quality, got good nutrients in it. We're not just eating fast food and the highly processed, no nutrient value stuff. I'm eating good food. It's got nutrients. I'm eating my meats, my vegetables, throwing some fruits in there. Well, you got to digest the foods and get the nutrients out, including zinc. But if your gut's disrupted, you can't digest your food well. And if you're taking an acid blocking medicine, you have no stomach acid, you're not digesting your food at all, not getting any nutrients out, including zinc. Well, zinc is really important for testosterone production. And so zinc is one of two minerals that are notoriously hard to get from the bloodstream into the cells. And inside the cells of our body, that's where all the work happens. So if you draw a blood level of zinc, you see what's in the blood. That's not where the action is. You want to know if that zinc's getting inside the cell. And so you may see on a blood test a serum zinc, blood zinc. And that's not going to tell you anything. But what the test we like to run is called a red blood cell zinc, RBC zinc. They look inside of a red blood cell to see if the zinc got in the cell. And that has been correlated with inability or ability, if it's good, to make testosterone. So red blood cell zinc should always be more than 12 on most labs. They kind of go from like 9 to 14, you want to be above 12. Well, if you're lower than that, you're not making testosterone. That's because of the gut. Now, also the gut is the organ that mainly we get rid of toxins from the body. There's some toxins in our system that we can pee out and sweat out and breathe out, but mostly we got to poop toxins out. And that's kind of where the crap goes. Crap goes in the crapper, right? And so we get, toxins from the outside. We have cells all the cells in our body have toxic byproducts, metabolism. They create toxins. We got to run our detox pathways. We got to get toxins into the gut and then poop in the toilet. But when the gut's disrupted, it actually gets leaky. This leaky gut that people hear a lot about. And that drives a lot of things, including food start bugging us. We start getting food sensitivities. But also, even if you can get a toxin into the gut to go in the toilet, to poop it out, it's not going in the toilet. It actually gets reabsorbed through the leaky gut back into the bloodstream and builds over time. And so iron is a very important mineral. We need it for a lot of things, super important. But what tends to happen with this leaky gut thing is we can't get rid of excess iron, and iron builds in our system. So there's a test. It's better than the iron test. It's called ferritin, which is iron stores. And ferritin should be about 100 on the blood test. Well, you'll start accumulating excess ferritin, iron in your system, and then it starts creating a lot of inflammation in the system, including high ferritin levels are so irritating to the gut, it can actually give you a stomach ulcer. But oftentimes what happens in guys is that excess ferritin iron accumulates in the testicles. And then the testicles can't make testosterone like they should. And it's because of this gut detoxing. And so we kind of kid around with guys when we see these high ferritin levels in the guy. We want to be 100, we'll see 200, we'll see 300, we'll see 500, 700 in guys. And we kind of say, hey, this excess iron is accumulating in your testicles and you can't make testosterone. So, hey, we kind of joke around and say, hey, you got rusty nuts. And rule of thumb, you don't want to let any nuts get rusty, right? Whether it's on your tractor,
That's
your lawnmower,
hilarious.
or
Yeah.
your nuts, they should not get rusty.
Yeah.
And they go,
Yeah.
oh, that makes sense.
That makes sense.
And so they can't make testosterone.
Yeah.
And so you can see that on a simple blood test as well. And so typically, we always say, well, cortisol throws off the gut. Cortisol makes it hard to make testosterone, makes it hard to make all of them. So anything you can do to create calm in the body really helps cortisol. And so do your deep breathing exercises, get out in nature. Nature is so calming to be out there. There's all kinds of studies about how nature helps human health and well-being. Do your stuff that creates this calm for you. Whatever it is, meditation, yoga, deep breathing, get out in nature, and then creating calm is a really good one. The toxicity goes beyond the iron, though. You're right. There's all these toxins always make it hard to make hormones. and we get all these environmental toxins up in our system, not just the old iron. And so as you start healing the gut, you start absorbing iron from your food. But it's kind of tough to heal when you don't have testosterone. So it's kind of like, well, we got to heal stuff, but how do you heal stuff when you don't have testosterone? And so it's kind of this vicious cycle you can get into. And so we will use like zinc supplements to start bringing up red blood cell zinc. So you build it up. Now, eventually, you might not need that supplement because you can get the zinc out of your own food once the gut gets healthy. And then with these high ferritin levels, we ask guys just go donate, go to the Red Cross and donate blood. Don't tell them you're donating blood because you have high ferritin iron levels. They won't take it, even though it's not really good. It's not going to hurt the people. If you got somebody with a car accident, they're bleeding out, they need blood, and they could actually use the iron in the blood, right? Because iron makes blood red. They need the iron, they need the blood, but they won't take it. And so we just tell guys, well, go there, donate, tell them you're there because you want to help your fellow man. And then they go, oh, what a nice man. He wants to help his fellow man. We'll take your blood, kind of a thing. And as you donate blood, you give away some of this iron along with the blood, and that starts bringing the levels down. And depending on how high they are, we'll say, well, go, donate every 4 to 6 weeks as often as they'll take your blood 2 times, 3 times, and then we'll retest your blood level and see if you come down. But you give away the iron, you're getting rid of this excess thing that creates inflammation all over the place and making you feel crummy. But also now your testicles are able to start making more testosterone on their own. So we might say, now, if for some reasons a guy has a health issue that they won't take their blood, and there are certain health issues like they go, well, you've had hepatitis in the past, we can't take your blood donation or some other things. Well, then you can actually write for what they call a therapeutic phlebotomy, a prescription where their insurance will cover them going into the lab in the hospital. They'll just draw blood off and dump it for you. So there's ways to work around that. And as we're giving them zinc, they're doing the relaxation stuff. We donate some blood or the therapeutic phlebotomy. We'll see guys that are like 200, and the next time we check them, they're like 440 or 380. We're going, going right up there. And we're like, oh, fantastic! Look at you. Already you're up 150 points, right? With just those few things. And then as we, continue to get the system healthier, they stop accumulating the excess ferritin. Their RBC zinc levels are perfect. Calm is being creative because you got zinc, which is so important. You don't have excess iron, which is important. They actually start fixing everything on top of the fact that they're making testosterone better, which is kind of helping everything. And their brain's better. They're losing weight. They're putting muscle on. Everything's just working better.
Wow. So stress, I recognize that stress has a huge impact on health. I don't think most people appreciate that. The world, of course, hears a lot about stress and the impacts of stress on the body. And I think a lot of people feel that, you can feel tension headaches and you can get those kinds of things. But I don't think most people recognize that stress has this level of an impact on your body. So what's interesting about what you're what you're saying, and as you're sitting here talking about all this, I'm kind of laughing at in my head. 6 months ago, I had blood work done. When I had the blood work done, I was basically in the middle of going through a divorce and going through closing a business. So very high psychological stress. Um, I still weight trained and did these other things as well. So more stress on top of that stress. So I had physical stress, which is fine. I've done that my whole life. My body's used to that. And I didn't do it excessively, but then the psychological stress added on top of that. So my sex hormone binding globulin levels were high. My ferritin levels were high. My testosterone level, I think, is 585, which is low from what you're talking about, but normal within the normal.
But not too bad, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
it's not bad. What's the other one? There was another thing that you mentioned. At any rate, it's funny that you talk about going and donating blood because, of course, I start digging into it because I'm kind of nerdy about these things, and I'm like, what's the connection between the sex hormone binding globulin and the ferritin and the testosterone, and what's the connection here? And that was one of the things they recommended. So I only did it twice between 6 months ago and today. I'm actually getting retested tomorrow, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I donated blood twice, so they were spaced out over a 6 month period of time, every 2 months, every 3 months, or whatever it was. I sounds like I should have done it a little more, but it'll be interesting to see when I get those whenever I get my next blood test back, what it ends up being. But it's reassuring to me, at least, to hear from what you're saying that was a somewhat strategic move. Now, the zinc uh, that you talked about, I'll have to go back and look at that as far as my own goes, because this is the blood panel I got done was pretty extensive. It's one of the online blood, what special blood panel kind of companies. So it's pretty extensive. So I'm
And
pretty
they'll
sure I
tend to
saw.
check that red blood cell zinc because in those kind of companies, they kind of know that they know what the important things are to check for.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, they won't run like, well, they ran that the wrong way. No, they know kind of like what data is needed.
Yeah, I'll be curious to go back and look and see what that is. I saw RBC, and for some reason I didn't look up what RBC meant, but it's all connected now, and I'm glad to know the difference between the two. And I think that's another important thing. Just because you have a level of a vitamin or mineral in your bloodstream, it doesn't mean that your mitochondria are able to process it effectively, or your cells are able to process it effectively. So I
Yeah.
think that that's an important distinction.
And to your point too, so um, everything that would drive up sex hormone binding globulin levels are the things we're talking about, like stress will drive up sex hormone binding, like physical and emotional stress. Well, not having enough zinc, that's stress, that drives up sex hormone binding globulin. Having too much ferritin, creating inflammation, that drives it up. So a lot of times what you'll see is as that sex hormone binding globulin goes up, of course, the free testosterone goes down. And so you do the original blood work on a guy and totals low, free's low, well, then let's start fixing this stuff, right? Well, the next time you see the guy, maybe the total goes up a little bit, okay? And you're not super impressed by how much went up, but the free's gone up. As the sex hormone binding hormones come down, you're like, well, your free testosterone was only like a 3, and you want to, well, I'm sorry, like a 30, want to be 200. Well, your total's about the same, but your free's gone up from 30 to like 70. And like, oh, cool. Well, you haven't really started making more, but you're freeing it up so much better. And you know you're on the right track and they're already feeling better because there's more there to be used. And you just know the total is going to go up and the free keeps going up and all that kind of stuff.
So outside of psychological, well, we'll say stress in general, but I think psychological stress is probably the big one for most people because sadly, physical stress, most people don't physically stress themselves all that much. I would actually argue that most people should physically stress themselves more often, which would reduce their psychological stress.
Well, there's good physical stress like working out, but
Yeah.
there's bad physical stress like not having enough of a very important vitamin like zinc.
Oh, there you
That's a
go.
24-hour a day physical stress to the system not to have that zinc. So
Yep.
that's kind of the physical stress I'm talking about. Not the good physical stress, but the 24/7 dragging you down, not having something important.
Valid. Good distinction. Outside of that, what kind of impact does nutrition have on this story?
Yeah, so you if you don't have enough zinc, you probably don't have a lot of other nutrients, right? And they're all really important in their own ways, including, there's other nutrients that are very important, magnesium and vitamin D is uber important. If you don't have those guys, your body's under stress, right? And that can make it hard to bring down that sex hormone binding globulin. So things like vitamin D is super important. On a blood test, you want to be 70 to 90. The range a lot of times are like 20 to 80, 30 to 100, that kind of stuff. You want to be 70, 90. Nobody's going to get that from sun exposure. We're just very bad at making vitamin D from sun exposure nowadays for a variety of reasons. So everybody needs to be on the right amount of vitamin D as a daily supplement to get that level up. The other thing that tends to be a really big central mechanism, and this kind of goes with this gut health issue, is vitamin D is so important. Every cell in your body has a receptor for vitamin D. So the vitamin D can attach to that cell, tell the cell what to do. One reason why vitamin D is so important. But we have to have vitamin D receptors that are sensitive so that vitamin D can attach and do the work. They can't become resistant. And when vitamin D receptors become resistant, You can have all the vitamin D in the world, it's not going to be able to attach into the work, including we have many more vitamin D receptors in the gut than any other body part. And when scientists figured that out about 10 years ago now, they go, wow, vitamin D must be really important for the gut. And so people hear a lot about insulin, the hormone made by the pancreas to control blood sugar. Well, every cell has an insulin receptor because insulin's got to tell the cells how to deal with blood sugar. Well, insulin receptors become resistant, and we have an epidemic of insulin resistance, pre-diabetes or diabetes. It can't do the work. Same kind of concept here with this vitamin D. But when you fix the vitamin D receptor resistance in the gut, not only are you fixing the gut exactly like you need to fix it, but it actually is such a central mechanism, you're fixing everything in the body at the same time, including the original data said, hey, when you use daily vitamin D, a daily probiotic, which is the good bacteria in the gut, and then a daily supplement, something called butyrate, which is a short chain fatty acid made by the good bacteria in the gut. So you got vitamin D, should be made by sun exposure. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen like it should. Probiotics, well, you should have them in your gut, but then all these things that kill the gut I went over, kill the good bacteria. And your good bacteria should be making butyrate because it's natural. Should be, and if you don't got good bacteria, you're not making it, kind of a thing. But you use the 3 as a supplement, you fix that vitamin D receptor resistance. Oh my gosh, the central mechanism in the gut, the original data, 2016. This is exactly what you want to do to get rid of autoimmune disease of the gut, like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. And then when people have like recurrent C. diff or H. pylori infections in the gut that are these gut infections you can't get rid of and terrible stuff, but they go, this also looks like what you want to do for everything though. Well, then 6 months later, the same researchers out of University of Illinois, Chicago go, oh my gosh, you use this foundational triad to fix this vitamin D receptor resistance. It is a nuclear weapon, quote unquote, the study nuclear against metabolic syndrome. It fixes that insulin resistance, abnormal weight gain, cholesterol stuff. And I go, wow, you fix vitamin D receptor resistance, you fix insulin resistance. Wow, is this vitamin D receptor resistance a central mechanism? But then they said, well, it kind of fixes everything. I'm like, well, does that mean it's kind of like fixing all receptor resistance? Anything your cell needs that should be able to attach and do the work? Those receptors become resistant. Is this what vitamin D does? Well, then sure enough, a couple of years later, Harvard Journal of Psychiatry says, well, you fix the gut this way, it treats major depressive disorder. And I go, oh, that's really cool. Another psychiatric journal, well, you fix the gut this way, it changes people's personalities. They become more outgoing and more social. So this is like, by fixing this, using this foundational triad to fix those vitamin D receptors, you're fixing everything, including you're absorbing your zinc and your other nutrients. You're getting detox, getting rid of all this toxic crap from the system above and beyond even the excess iron. And oh my gosh, now everything is just kind of working better. And this is part of the, well, we can get your testosterone production, but now you don't even need the zinc supplement. You don't even need to give blood anymore. You stay good because your gut's been healthy and you're managing stress better. And then that's where you can then stay good long term. You don't have to necessarily, keep doing some of these same things because now you fix the whole system and you just kind of do it on your own. If you keep taking antibiotics all the time, you keep popping Motrins and Advils, well, you're going to kind of undo some of that. But you're so healthy, you don't get infections. You don't need the antibiotics. Hey, you're so healthy, you don't even need the Motrins and Advils anymore because you're not a grumpy old man, but you're not a crippled old man either. And you're running around like you're a young guy because you don't have the joint stuff that goes with it as well.
Vitamin D, probiotics, and butyrate.
And
Uh,
this butyrate made by the good bacteria in the gut, and this is how the body is so smart. If it's something really important, it's doing a ton of things at the same time. So, like for example, butyrate prevents cancer 5 different ways. Oh, butyrate is so important for brain health, it helps people recover after stroke. It's so great for lung health. You got children with cystic fibrosis who are basically drowning on their own lung secretions. It helps those kids. It's like, wow, the body, if it makes something, it's making it to do a bunch. I kind of think of the body as like this ultimate multitasker. It never makes one thing to do one thing. It does one thing to do like a ton of things. And so this is where if we use something as a supplement that ideally the body should make but just can't make, it's touching so many bases at the same time. Whereas like we use prescription meds, it's kind of like, well, this one med does one thing and that's it. But then you need another med to do the second thing and the third thing. Or if you use these naturally occurring things that are the real, even though there's a lot of really great things the body likes, but if you use these really big ones that the body will make on its own, but it can't, so you give it to it, you're really correcting a ton of things all at the same time. And then this is where you don't necessarily need all the testosterone restoration therapy to give the body testosterone. And yes, testosterone does a ton of stuff, but if you can get the body to make testosterone better, you darn well know it's doing 100 other things better too. And then testosterone's got all these other helpers, and then that's when you feel, super like you should.
So that was very helpful. Vitamin D, probiotics, butyrate. Um, there was a question I wanted. Oh, vitamin D levels. Let me jump on that real quick, and then we'll talk very briefly about what, if you do choose or you do believe that injectables is the way to go. And I say injectables because I believe that's the only, not the only, but that's just the most effective path. If you're going to use testosterone, that's going to be the most effective way for you to use it. We can talk a little bit about what a good strategy might look like. Now, of course, everyone's levels is going to depend on that, but at least how you can most effectively distribute it so that you can get the most out of it. Um,
Yep.
Vitamin D levels. What kind of intake are you talking about? I know that it depends on your own current level, but you got pills that have 2,000 IUs, you got pills that have 1,000, you got pills that have 5,000, you got pills that have 9,000. Does it need to have vitamin K2? Does it need to have other things with it? Because vitamin D it's fat soluble also, so I'm assuming it needs to have the fat. The butyrate then counts as the fat. Am I getting that part?
Not quite, not quite,
Not
almost,
necessarily.
almost. So,
Okay.
so ideally, you want to base vitamin D dosing on your blood level.
Hmm.
Any lab can run it. So usually people need between 5,000 a day and 10,000 a day. And because it's fat soluble, you want to take it with a meal because pretty much any meal's got at least a little bit of fat that allows you to absorb it better. So the rule of thumb is, let's say maybe start at 5,000 and then 8 to 10 weeks later, have your level tested. Now, you can go into a traditional lab and do it, or there's actually ways that you can go online nowadays and order your own labs. And sometimes it's like pennies on the dollar. Well, hey, this lab test, this blood test might cost you this much if you haven't made your deductible, but you can go online and do it for like $3 instead of like 120 or something like that. And so you can actually do this yourself. And then ideally, you want to be 70 to 90. Well, for every 10 points that you still want to go up, you add another 1,000 a day, kind of a thing. So you go, okay, I'm taking 5,000 a day. I did my test. I'm running low. I don't think I need 10,000 a day. I need maybe somewhere in the middle. Well, then just do 10,000 Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 5,000 other days a week. That kind of a thing. Because it's a fat soluble one, it kind of builds up in your system slowly. That's why you want to wait 8 to 10 weeks before checking the level. Then you plateaued, you hit the steady state. Well, then that's when you want to retest. With water soluble vitamins, like maybe B vitamins, you got to take them like twice a day because you pee them out if you
Consistent.
take them all at
Hmm.
one shot. Whereas the fast supplements, like it kind of builds slowly over time. You miss a day, don't worry about it. It's not like you're going to tank all the way down. You kind of blip
Little
down a
blip.
smidge, but don't worry about it. If you miss a day, just take 2 days worth the next day, that kind of a thing. And so you want to kind of get the right amount. Even getting it up towards the ideal is so important. A little bit goes a long way with these really big ones. And so, like for vitamin D, they see things like, well, for every 30 points your vitamin D goes up, you cut your risk of ever getting cancer of any kind by 25%. So if you go like from 20, where a lot of people are, and oftentimes I see less than 10. I mean, that's how tough it is to make vitamin D on our own nowadays. You go from like 20 to 80, you've automatically decreased risk of ever getting any cancer by 50%. And you're like, oh cow, that's great. But also prevents heart attacks, prevents strokes, does all this great stuff. on top of, hey, I need to get it good so that I can kind of get my body in position to fix everything. It just kind of fixes everything.
Hmm. All right. So let's say we've done the work. We've tried to do some things. We've lowered our physiological stress, our psychological stress, and we've, figured out our zinc issues. We've done some things, and we're still not quite at the level of testosterone that we want to be. So, what is again, this is all going to be based on an individual because their levels are going to be different, but I'm curious if there's like a protocol that would be more effective once a week. Do you spread it out throughout the week? What does that look like? So, what do you
So
think?
somebody said that there's an in between thing. Okay, so we've done our due diligence. We put our body in position to make it better. Let's say it's not making it much better, but every other body, your body's so much happier already. Okay, you're really fixing a ton of this stuff. You just can't quite get it made yet on your own, even though you did all the foundational stuff. Well, then there's a medicine called Clomid,
Say
and
again?
Clomid, C L
Clomid.
O M I D.
Okay.
So Clomid historically has been used in women to help jumpstart estrogen production when they're trying to get pregnant. They can't get pregnant, they will use Clomid. In guys, it jumpstarts testosterone production.
Interesting.
And so it comes in a 50 milligram tablet, scored down the middle. You break it in half. A guy will take 25 milligrams at bedtime. And what this will do is it will jumpstart testosterone production. So you did your foundational work. Most guys will start making it on their own. Most guys start freeing it up on top of making more. But there's every once in a while we can't get it going again. Uh, the Clomid, what it does is basically you take it at bedtime. So for a couple hours as you're sleeping, it blocks receptors in the brain that are trying to understand how much testosterone's in the system. Because there's always a feedback where the brain wants to know kind of what's going on in the body because it wants to know, well, if we don't have enough of something, do I need to tell the body to make more? Kind of a thing, right? And so you block these receptors at the base of the brain basically and make the brain think you have no testosterone. And the brain goes, holy crap, testicles, come on, dudes, let's
Wake
get some
up.
effort going here. And it jumpstarts testosterone production. And it works great. Now, historically, when this first came out, we're like, okay, use it for 30 days, stop it, wait 2 weeks, and then see if you're making it more. Nowadays, we know this Clomid is really safe. And so ideally, you use it for about 3 months, check and see if you're making more testosterone. Almost universally, you will be. Okay. Now, there's no reason you have to stop it, but oftentimes all you need to do is use the Clomid to jumpstart it. So then you do it for 3 months. You check. You go, oh, okay, you're making more on your own. That's fantastic. You're also freeing it up. The free testosterone looks so much better. And then the guy may say, well, I like that I'm making. I'm feeling a ton better, but I'd like to see if I can make it on my own without it. We go, cool. That's great. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop the Clomid. We're going to wait a month and check your testosterone levels again and see if you're maintaining it. And pretty much they are, but every once in a while they'll start dropping again. So we go, okay, well, let's do it for 3 months again. Check it towards the end. Yep, you're making it on your own now. And we'll try to stop it again. And maybe this time you're maintaining it on your own. It's like, okay, cool. When we started to stop it the first time, you couldn't quite manage it on your own. But now we did it another 3 months, and now you're managing on your own. Now, we know that this Clomid is safe to take long term. So there are some guys out there that just can't keep it going on their own. So we might need to take the Clomid long term to maintain it, but they're still making it on their own. It's not like the Clomid is testosterone. It's just keeping things going. And because our world is crazy busy or crazy stressful, but also like your point with the plastics, right? I just before we were just lecturing, my wife and I in Paris, and just before I left, I was watching one late night comedy shows, and they talked about the study that came out that they did a study on. They looked at 19 different testicles in the study, and they found that in every one of them there was plastics in the testicles of human men, and they kind of made a joke. Well, why 19? They tend to come in pairs. How come they didn't do a study on 20? Like that. Because and I'm like, well, you're missing the point. The point
Yeah,
is
yeah.
that is super sad that there's actually plastic getting in our testicles.
Mhm.
I also watched this great outdoor show. I love this one from Oregon, all about the Oregon nature and all this. And they did this study where they had people going way up into the mountains and to what should be some of the freshest water, and they dragged it looking for micro plastics, the little tiny thin fibers, and they had put them on our microscope, and sure enough, they found microfibers of plastics, and they go, there's only a couple cabins that are above this that use, outhouses, right? So it must be coming from that. Well, it turns out a lot of the microfibers that are used in clothing, when you wash them, they kick out all these little microfibers and they get into the water supply, even in some of the cleanest water. And they go, that's not good. Well, then here this comedian is like, hey, guys have plastics in their testicles. I'm like, that is not good.
Yeah.
And then you're even challenging the testicles to keep functioning well,
Mhm.
even though they got this, stuff that's kind of
Mhm.
making it challenging for them to do it. So you'd like to think that, we now know that we can jumpstart most guys' testosterone and all this, but it's a challenge to make this stuff, kind of a thing. But even if that doesn't work, and there's a variety of reasons why maybe that stuff doesn't work, even though I got to tell you, when testosterone we first knew, I used it a lot. I probably at more than 9 out of 10 times, I can get a guy's testosterone good on him. Probably 95 out of 100 times. There's probably like 2, 3 times a year I have to actually use testosterone restoration therapy.
Mhm.
You always want to use bioidentical. You never want to use a hormone in the body that's not just like the body makes, even though they may sort of sound the same and they
Mhm.
have a hormone impact. You never want to use them. And for guys, it's either injectables or pellets nowadays. The injectable is a bit more physiologic because your body sort of, even in a 24-hour time span, guys' testosterone goes up and down. So guys' testosterone tend to be highest in the morning, slowly go down as the day goes on, hits a slow spot around bedtime. So this is why guys will tend to have maybe more sex drive in the morning and not quite as much when they get home from work, kind of a thing. So there's a 24-hour clock there. The body likes ups and downs in hormones. And so the best way to do the injectable is once a week. And what you want is a dose that first half of the week could be maybe a little higher than you're shooting for. You cross the middle and you get a little lower than you want towards the end. But it's really kind of a smooth up and down. And the body likes that up and down. It's more physiologic. Some people are recommended every 2 weeks or even longer. Well, then you got to like overshoot so much early in that 2 week process to avoid totally undershooting by the end. You start getting too much up and down, but you're overshooting a lot during that first part. And what happens with the injectables is it tends to like to convert to estrogens if you use higher dose than you want. And even though guys need estrogens, you don't want too much. And there's two different estrogens that you should always be tested for on the blood test. One is estradiol, one is estrone. For a guy, estradiol levels on the blood test should be 20 to 40. Estrone should be less than 10. You really don't want any of that in your system. And so one of the things that might limit the amount of testosterone is it excessively converting to the estrogens? If it is, there's some things you can do to prevent that. Uh, you could come down on the dose of testosterone so you don't do that much. You also don't want to make too much of this dihydrotestosterone. That tends to be more of an issue when you use topical hormones, like topical testosterone in a woman. You don't want to use injectables in testosterone topically. That'll tend to convert excessively to dihydrotestosterone, not so much to the estrogens. But you always want to make sure you get a total testosterone, a free testosterone, a dihydrotestosterone, estradiol, estrone, sex hormone binding globulin as you're using the injectables. And kind of the rule of thumb with any hormone restoration therapy is start low and go slow. Because you may find a very tiny dose, the dude's like, wow,
Mhm.
Yahoo, that's my old self, kind of a thing. And um, and if you need to, you can go up, to how the person's feeling and what the labs tell you. But truly, a little bit goes a long way when you're talking about something that's so darn healthy. Um, historically, when we weren't quite sure how this all worked, a lot of times guys got started on too high of a dose. Or sometimes practitioners aren't quite familiar with this. They may put them on too high of a dose to start with. But then they're considering too much of the estrogens, and too much estrogen really is not good for a guy. But the guy feels so darn good because he got testosterone. The doc goes, "Oh, the dose we started you on is too high. We got to come down." The guy's like, "No, no way, no way, doc. I'm not going down. I'm feeling
Mm.
like great." And the doc goes, "Well, you're converting to estrogen too much, and this has this negative impact." And they go, "Well, I don't care. I'm feeling so good. I know." And so you kind of want to go work your way up. You can always go up. Now, when you do the blood test to check for the level, though, if you're doing it once a week on the injectables, you want to do the blood test right in the middle, day 3 to 4. If for some reason you're on a every other week, every 2 week schedule, 7 days in, because you want to see right in that middle there to give you the best idea. Is this dose perfect? Is it, do we have room to go up? Is it too much? If you're excessively converting to estrogens, um, there's several different things you can do. There's actually something you can add to the liquid testosterone that blocks conversion of testosterone to estrogen. You could also use a naturally occurring a compound called DIM. It comes from cruciferous vegetables like the broccoli, the
DIM.
cauliflower, the kales. Yeah, DIM, and it helps you detox estrogens better. And so you may convert to the estrogens a little more you want, but you're detoxing, getting them out efficiently, and they don't build up in your system, kind of a thing. But that DIM is so good at detoxing, you get rid of a lot of toxic crap from your system, not just the estrogen. So it's kind of good for you in general. But that's kind of something that you can use to kind of help in that situation as well. Now the pellets, which is a newer way, it's kind of a 24/7 thing. You don't get this up and down that the body likes so much. So it's not quite as physiologic as the injectables, even though you avoid needles. The needles aren't all that problematic. They're not like super painful and like that. You just like shoot them in your thigh. It's pretty easy. Um, but when you're using either a cream or a pellet, the blood tests are not going to give you great information about the level. They'll tend to underestimate the true amount in your system. So what you need to do if you're doing pellets, ideally, is now you have to do saliva testing of testosterone levels and the estrogens. And it's not a hard test. You spit in a tube and mail it off, that kind of a thing. But that's really the best way to see how you're doing uh, uh, testosterone wise if you're using pellets. And so you put the pellet in, 4 weeks later, you do a saliva test to see how you're doing, and that gives you the good feedback on, is that the right dose? Is it too much? Is it not enough? Also, am I converting excessively to the estrogens and this kind of thing? So when you use the pellets, it makes it a little bit more challenging because whereas most insurance companies have no problem checking a blood test for this stuff, there's probably a copay of some significance. Not like $1,000, but maybe like $200.
Mhm.
Now, um, when you get to the level that you want of the testosterone restoration therapy, you really only need labs once a year. So it's not like, well, you do it, every 3 months to start with and this kind of thing. But once you get it right, you only need to do it once a year. And the once a year thing is what we kind of say, well, the only thing that ever stays the same is change. And so just like vitamin D levels, you on a vitamin D daily dose, your level's perfect. Well, check it once a year. Testosterone, the same thing. Thyroid, check it once a year. Hey, I'm on thyroid medicine. I'm great. We want to check it once a year just to make sure, because things just change over time. But you really don't need to check it very often once you get in that sweet spot.
Very good. All right, David, we got a lot of takeaways. Lower stress, lower mental stress, lower your physical stress, primarily your internal physical stress, mostly focusing on zinc, RBC. Um, Improve your vitamin D levels in your gut health by taking vitamin D, probiotic, and butyrate
Mhm.
together. Uh,
And then the
Clomid,
the ferritin,
the ferritin. Check on
the
the
iron
ferritin.
stores, yeah,
Yes,
that
the iron
detoxing
iron
thing.
source. Make sure you're paying attention to that.
No
before
rusty nuts.
no rusty
Can't
nuts.
forget the rusty nuts.
I'm never gonna forget that. I'm never gonna forget that story, by the way. Um, if you're not feeling it and you're not there quite yet, Clomid is where we want to go next before we jumped into then the ejectable. And the Clomid you can do, it sounds like long term and it doesn't
Yeah,
have any negative effects or anything along those lines, but you do want to
right.
check every 90 days or so to see if you're maintaining your own levels, if your
But
body's actually
usually, like, 9 out of 10 times, you'll be able to maintain it without the Clomid long term, yeah.
very good. David, lots of good stuff in there. I know that after our conversation, I told you what I kind of had going on with myself. It'll be interesting to see tomorrow. I won't get the blood test back for another week or so, but it'll be interesting to see how, things panned out for the changes that I've made. My psychological stress is significantly lower. I did the blood draws a couple of times. So we'll see how that ends up going. And then I plan on implementing a few of these other ones, and I'll check myself again probably in the next 3 months and see what happens. But
And I think your viewers need to know that this is such a central mechanism. It really is preventing heart attacks and strokes.
mm,
And this is where historically, guys might get a heart attack in their 70s, but then it started being the 50s. And now you see guys getting heart attacks in their 20s. And this is directly tied into this lack of testosterone production. So this is really helping not just your brain, and you're not the grumpy old man anymore. You're this happy-go-lucky, fun guy to be around. You're making muscle burning fat, but also you're protecting yourself from heart attacks and strokes and all kinds of things you don't want. It's really such a central mechanism.
very good. I appreciate you emphasizing that. Um, Last thing, where can we find you in case we want more?
So you can get me at drdavidbilstrom.com. And I write blog posts. I have over 150 videos on my YouTube channel about this stuff. There's 2 different levels of courses for non-medical people to learn more about this. Um, a lot of this ties into autoimmune disease where the body actually attacks itself. And even things like heart attacks and strokes, we now know are autoimmune. Alzheimer's, dementia has this autoimmune component. So everything we're talking about is protecting you from everything, including this autoimmune stuff. And so the free online educational email course we have, which is 7 emails, each one's a deep dive into the central mechanisms, including this vitamin D receptor, vitamin D, cortisol, the stress hormone stuff, might be a nice way for a lot of the viewers to go, oh, okay, yeah, I understand what he was saying. And that's exactly what, they kind of talked about, and even understanding how this works, but also we're trying to teach people not only how this stuff works, but how to fix it themselves.
Yeah, I'll make sure to put all of that in the show notes so that we can have direct links to those. David, as always, certainly appreciate your knowledge and wisdom, brother.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, David.